I mean, they knew I'd be like in Jeffrey Wilson or in Ida Barber in that particular housing project. They just didn't know which rundown crack house I was in. I don't think it didn't seem like they did, but they were able to get two black officers from the Portsmouth Police Department to work with us, and those guys were great, and they knew the neighborhoods, and so they would wear a walkie-talkie mic radio system that would come up to their ear, and they'd just put on their coats because it was wintertime, and they would patrol or walk the neighborhood. They would literally stay out in the cold and be out there for about and be within about a block of me. But they knew exactly where I was. And we had an agreement that if things went bad, get low, get small. Go to the floor, get small.
That's Jennifer Eskew, a former state trooper, undercover, and ATF agent. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. Jennifer Clark Eskew is a 32-year law enforcement veteran who grew up in rural Virginia and never stopped chasing the thing that she felt at age 6, a calling to protect people. She became a Virginia state trooper, then the state's first full-time female undercover. She rose to an ATF senior special agent responding to and investigating the 1996 Olympic Park bombings in Atlanta and the Pentagon on 9/11. And she's written it all down in her debut memoir, Becoming Fire. Jennifer broke a first ceiling in becoming a Virginia state trooper in a state police agency that in every way was built for men. She broke a second ceiling, becoming the first full-time female undercover agent in the state's history, where she helped take down one of the largest drug trafficking operations the state had ever seen. Living under a false identity in rooms where mistakes could mean a blown investigation, serious injury, or even death, Jennifer says she learned to read the room with a precision that the academy could not teach. Jennifer responded to the Pentagon in the hours and days following the September 11, 2001 attacks. Jennifer was diagnosed with cancer related to her 9/11 exposure and advocates nationally for health and compensation rights for September 11 attack first responders. She was also on the ground for the 1996 Centennial Park bombing in Atlanta. And today, we're going to talk about Jennifer's journey and the interests that led to her career, her travels through the criminal justice system, and inside high-profile crimes. And we're going to talk about what it took her to keep fighting in this work and now beyond. Over the course of our conversation, we're going to dive into everything from her undercover work across the state that spanned from narcotics to being bait for the Colonial Parkway serial killer, and her work at the epicenter of the opioid epidemic in Lee County, Virginia, to things like investigating the Olympic Park bombings and 9/11, a task that quickly turned from evidence collection to body collection. Hey, Jennifer, I wanted to thank you for coming on to the show. I had the awesome opportunity in Las Vegas of meeting you. I don't know if you know the backstory, but I'm walking over there and a podcaster I know grabs me and he's like, you have to come over and meet this woman, Jennifer, from the ATF. And he had just met you. And so I'm walking over to meet you. And another person, one of my former guests, stops me and he's like, have you talked to this woman from the ATF over here? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go talk to the lady from the ATF. And then you weren't there.
Yeah.
And I had to come back and find you. But I did. And I'm glad I did.
Okay, Jason, I appreciate you coming back over.
Of course.
I think I only left my booth about 3 times total that weekend. And because I really
takes a
felt
long
the
time
need
to get back.
be there. I felt the need to be there. So I don't know if you left when I was chasing down a schlep or if you left or if I left to go down and chase Paul Morrow, but I was going to catch Paul Morrow if no matter what it took.
It was so funny. It was just it's a very interesting event to me because, if you had asked me before I went to my first crime con whether I would ever go to an event like that, I would have probably recoiled at it thinking it's exploitive or other things like that. But you actually get there and you find people like you who are really dedicated to the work that you did and to educating and to helping people understand. You run into all these victim advocates. You hear the backstories of some of these creators and why they're doing what they're doing. And you listen to what the listeners or fans are talking about, and they're talking about really meaningful things. And it's just been a neat experience for me to go to it. And I'm glad you were able to make it this year.
Yeah. I I was really thrilled to get to go. Great to be accepted. It was on the bucket list, as I talked to you earlier. Everybody you meet has got this interesting story there, and they're not exploiting something. They're telling you about somebody that they truly cared about and that they want you to know about that person who's been missing for 20 years or who was murdered 40 years ago, and they're still fighting to get them justice. And then you meet law enforcement like myself, and we want to talk to you about finding the justice and what is out there and what maybe could help and what else could possibly be done. Um, and it just everybody's clicking. It all fits together. And then you've got the podcasters telling the stories. Um, it helps because I think the more attention that these uh, horrific criminal acts get, the better chance of getting information, of not letting a person be forgotten. And
Yeah.
I've always been about never forget. Um, I don't want people to be forgotten.
Hmm.
Fan sounds like, somebody's running around, chasing after Taylor Swift or something. And I don't see them like that.
No
They are genuinely interested in the
topics
what's
that are,
happened,
yeah, yeah.
who this victim is, who their family is, um, and how they might be able to help with that, even if it's just a like, a share, a follow, or if perhaps they're like, hey, that took place in my state, and you're right, that law needs to change, or uh, the way the way they fund this needs to change.
Yeah, I've seen advocacy legislation, donating gas cards. I've seen listeners of mine go out and travel places and be parts of searches or inspiring them to go into certain careers and other things like that. It's all pretty powerful. Now, you and I share something in common. I live in Virginia, and my mother's side of the family is from Virginia, and you grew up in Virginia, our very diverse
Yes.
state. That's for
Yeah.
lovers, not for
Yes.
Chad, right?
That's it. That's it.
Right. Now, I will confess, I was born in Maryland, but one of the interesting things, you grew up in a small farming community in Virginia, and
Right.
you described it as one of those places where sort of like life was governed by the seasons. Everybody's neighbors knew their name, but violence didn't come often. But when it did, it left marks that really didn't fade. And I just want to ask about your experience growing up in Virginia and your community and sort of how that shaped you.
Yeah. Um, I mean, you grow up, and I guess there really is a village, to raise you. But I was surrounded by a lot of family, and then everybody in my community, because I knew them my whole life, they they were like family. They were around all the time, and so you just you're used to that. You know, when I go to school and like half the kids there are my cousin, uh, it's a thing. And you're in this small community, and then when something happens, particularly a violent crime like a homicide, and they didn't have a lot of homicides back then. 60s, the 70s, the 80s, homicides were maybe every 10 years, 12 years, maybe. Uh, you know, just very rare. And so when a homicide happens, everybody knows about it. Everybody's talking about it. Uh, and it is like the main focus of everybody in that town that this person, whoever did it, has to be caught and there has to be a judicial process and this person has to pay for this because, we don't, this is a terrible bad thing. And they're not forgotten. Whoever is killed, they don't just become a footnote or a back page story. They're the
Right.
front page story every time the newspaper gets printed, which is once a week back home. Um, they are the news everywhere you go, to everybody you talk to, whether it's at the gas station or it's at Walmart or it's at the grocery store, the big T burger, doesn't matter. That's what they're talking about. And it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's the teenagers or um, the ladies of the church, that's what's being discussed. And so uh, the story in my book came in 1968 when I was 6 years old. And with that, my mom, my sister, who was three, and uh, three neighbor ladies, Helen, who was driving, her sister Trudy, who was in the back seat with my mom and my sister, and then Miss Nettie, who was sitting in the front with Helen. They had gone shopping. Actually, I think they were out looking for sewing stuff. They were all big into sewing back then. And as they're headed home, it's a winter day. They see a police car wrecked in the field. There's a man out there who's got looks like a revolver and a shotgun, and he's waving at them. They think that the policeman needs help. He's obviously wrecked his car. He's in a field. This gentleman's waving at us. He needs help. They
Mhm.
pull over. He comes up. He's yelling. They can't quite understand him. Windows are up. You know, older people trying to hear it don't hear him, and he suddenly starts shooting at them. Well,
Oh,
Helen
wow.
takes off. She floors it, because the windows are being shattered out of the vehicle, and this person is shooting at them, and that's just again confusing. It's 1968, and nobody shoots at anybody. This is everybody has a gun because they hunt and just because they do, but this doesn't happen. And all of a sudden, it's happening. Uh, Nettie slumps over into Helen's lap. She's been shot through the chest. Um, my mom had pushed everybody down in the back seat, so her, my sister, and Miss Trudy, and they've got glass all over them. And they've got big coats on, so it doesn't affect their coats so much, but it's in their hair and in their head. And it's also gotten into their legs where they have like pantyhose, and my sister had tights on. So they've got glass shards everywhere. And Helen is able to get them to Dr. Ball's office. He is the doctor in town of Cambridge. Dr. Dan Ball was our doctor. He was everybody's doctor. Um, he was able to get Miss Nettie on on a ambulance and get her sent to Richmond's Medical College of Virginia, MCV at the time, and she was there for like 2 weeks, but she did survive, and in fact, she lived to be 94. But this was just a massive incident. And what happens is they have a manhunt. They bring in the state police. They had a fixed wing airplane that came in. They brought in dogs. Just a huge event. And it encompassed part of Lunenburg County, where we're from, part of Mecklenburg County, where this guy had actually stolen the police car and had taken the weapons from the police officers. He was an escaped convict. Uh, So this huge event takes place in the county in 1968, and I'm too little to be able to read the papers. You know, uh, they're not going to let me watch the TV news when it came on, but I am big enough to hide and listen to grown-ups talking because I want
Right.
to know what's going on. I want to know what
Right.
happened, and I know enough that my mom is sitting me down and talking to me because she's explaining why she's got band-aids, why my sister's got band-aids, why everything is up. And I'm also very in tune with my dad because I was his shadow. I was a kid, I was definitely my dad's shadow. And so I'm very aware that my dad is angry, not at me, not at my family, not at anybody I know, but he is angry. And I'm also aware that all of the men are upset. Like all my uncles, everyone is mad, you know, because this is an attack. This is something that doesn't happen there, and it's happened. But really, homicides didn't happen that often. I don't think the next one took place up there. This wasn't a homicide; it was just a shooting incident. But I don't recall a homicide until like sometime in the '70s when I was probably middle school or high school.
Yeah.
And that was very vicious. And then, they just didn't have that many. And we weren't used to it. It was a small town and we weren't used to it. Everybody knew everybody. And it did not matter which race or which religion you were. Everyone knew everybody. And they knew who your grandma was. They knew who your grandpa was. They knew where your family, they knew where your farm was.
Did you, and when you were growing up and you were 6, you said,
Right.
when that happened, how do you think you processed it as you were hearing those? Because one of the things that I was thinking about listening to that part of your story is, often when we cover cases, and, I've covered cases at different levels, but the deeper you cover a case, the more you realize that the reverberations of something like a murder don't end with the victim's family. They stretch to the law enforcement folks who are involved, the emergency medical personnel who are there. Those are the obvious ones, but then sometimes even to the politicians' families, but really to every child in a neighborhood, to every, to people you wouldn't even imagine in the grocery store. I was working on something about a case recently, and I could not
Mhm.
open a store in this town. I couldn't walk through a door where somebody didn't know the victim's name or
Yeah.
some story about the victim or their brother or their cousin or their something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's someone who maybe like me from a distance read the story as a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or whatever from a distance and was moved by the loss or the person's life or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that it's amplified almost in a small town, I imagine.
I think so. I think for me, um, I was mad. And maybe I picked that up off my dad, but I don't think so. I think what it was is that's my mom and that's my sister, and somebody hurt them, and that's my friends. And at 6 years old, that's your mental thinking of, you know, that's people people you love. That's all you
Wow.
know. You only know these people, and
Mhm.
somebody hurt them, and that's a bad guy, and that bad guy has to get caught, and the police have to catch him. And my only other thought in that time is, I knew how to shoot a gun. I lived on a farm. My dad had let me go out and shoot his shotgun. And since I was 4 years old, so 2 years, I had been going with my dad to squirrel hunt, mostly because I talked a lot. You put me on the other side of the tree, and the squirrel would come around to the side where it was quiet. So I knew about guns, and I knew about the fact that police catch bad guys. And I could go and help catch this bad guy. And I'm sure that, that was in my head, my mind, because I can still kind of feel it to this day. You got to go catch this bad guy. Somebody's got to catch this person. Um, he can't, you can't do that to people. And, you know, it just, I'm
Yeah,
sure all of that stuff was going on. So sometimes, the name of the book is called Becoming Fire. And a lot of times you have to figure out where that inner flame, that little spark that gets started inside of us of what
yeah,
we want to do,
yeah,
that maybe that's where the spark started at, that maybe that's part of it. And I think it could be, um, because at 6, it's just how you're processing it. You're just mad. You're angry.
yeah.
And you want somebody to, go catch them, go fix this.
And as
And
a kid, it's gotta be
yeah,
so frustrating to
right,
watch the
right.
bad guy
Right, because
get
you
away.
don't know. And then, of
Yeah.
course, the adults don't want you to hear, and, of course, I'm little, so I'm trying to make sure I'm, standing in the right place or sitting in the right place so I can hear, and I don't remember much more until later on when I'm probably about 12 or 13, and my dad is super mad one day, and It is because this guy is coming up for parole and they're talking about him getting out. And
Really only after a couple of years.
yeah, not
Right.
much. He shot at them and he shot Nettie and everything happened. He was already an escaped convict and he stole the police car and he stole the guns. Why are they talking about letting this guy out again? And my dad was just absolute livid. And my mom is upset. Nettie is upset. People are upset again because, it's like, what do you mean they're talking about letting him out kind of thing. So I remember that emotions going through and just not thinking it was right that he's supposed to be in prison. Why are they talking about letting him out? And then, and I couldn't tell you if he got out then or not. I'm not sure. Uh, my mom passed away a few years ago, and we were cleaning out the house, her house, my sister and I came across the newspaper articles. And I had never actually sat down and read those newspaper articles from December of 1968 from the local Cambridge paper. And Cambridge Victoria Dispatch is what it was, the KV. So I
Mm.
sat down and I looked at all the photos and read the whole story. Um, and it was like, it's a lot like I had remembered, and yet there were just things I hadn't known. But for the most part, it was exactly what my parents had told me and what I
Very
had remembered
similar.
being told. And, we didn't ask. It's like you couldn't talk about, you know, like I said, I knew Miss Nettie until she passed when she was 94. And never once in my life did I ever bring that story up to her or to ask her about it because that was impolite. And,
Yeah. Few people know
yeah,
the Southern gift of being able to not talk about the one thing that,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's
the
true.
one thing. Yeah.
You don't talk about it because you'll upset her. And, when you're 6 years old and you're being told, we don't want to upset Miss Nettie, that's what you didn't do it. You
Yep.
was
Yep.
yeah, everything because you'll make her cry. Well, you didn't want to make somebody cry, so, um, and,
And the benefits and strengths of there's so many benefits and weaknesses of what I
yeah,
would say growing up in the
yeah,
South. But one of them that's really kind of interesting, I wish when I think of my parents' families, I wish they talked about more. But then on the other hand, there's this piece of sort of like knowing that this too shall pass
yeah.
and that we will find a way together as a community, as a family, as friends to get through it. And it sounds like it really was the spark for you to start thinking about at least justice.
I think so. Um, at 18, I thought about it because I was right there at college and, I was thinking, you know, I'm thinking about being a police officer. And then I was like, nah, don't even bring that up. Just let that go. Don't even, because you're never going to get to do that because they don't hire women. It's just on TV. And
Mm.
I'd never seen one. See, and I I finished 4 years of college, and I still had never seen a female police officer. And I was in
Wow.
Old Dominion in Norfolk. I
Yeah.
had never seen a female police officer. Of course, I never got stopped by them, and I was never involved with law enforcement. I didn't know anybody in law enforcement. So the odds of me ever seeing a female law enforcement officer, we're not going to cross paths really.
We're
I'm
low
not going.
by your your
Yeah,
criminal profile. All right.
so I don't have anybody to.
No frame of
I'm not going to
reference.
cross their path because I'm not really even meeting male police officers. I'm pretty much not seeing anybody.
Right.
And, I mean, perhaps I should have gone out and committed some crimes. It might would have helped.
Career development and
Yeah,
effort.
yeah. Just
Probably
look,
probably not the best way.
yeah, yeah, that wasn't it. You know, and the whole thing is everybody goes, well, it's not like you can look it up on the internet. You you're gonna have to go and research that by asking questions. And it's like, well, where do you go to ask such questions? Like, so finally I was 22, I guess, when I hit my dad up with it. And I told him that I wanted to go into law enforcement. And I was thinking about applying to the city of Richmond and the city of Norfolk police departments. And he got super quiet.
Yeah. It's like that time when I was
Yeah.
18 and I'm getting ready to go to college, and I said to my dad, "You know what? I'm thinking about going in the military." And the look on his face was like, "Oh no."
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
We went on a long drive.
Yep.
Had a deep
So
heart to heart. Told me a little bit about Vietnam. I
yeah.
reconsidered.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my dad was just quiet, and I was like, "We're hunting," and I thought he was gonna just like pop back and answer like, "Are you stupid?" But he didn't say anything. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say anything. And I tell this story. When I tell it, I always say, "Hey, it was 2 minutes, 2 minutes of the longest nothing." You know, you could hear leaves crunching when we're walking, but she really no
Right.
answers. Thinking, pretty sure he heard me. So finally, he just says, "You need to go with the state police. If you're going to do this, you need to go with the state police."
Mm.
And I started laughing. And I said, they don't hire women. And he goes, "Yes, they do. You ever seen one? No, but that doesn't mean they don't hire. They have to." And I'm like, all right. He goes, "Yep. If you're going to do it, the state police." I'm thinking, holy crap. He wants me to be with the state police. That,
You were
it,
sitting there
it's,
thinking he's gonna tell me I'm out of my mind.
yeah, I'm thinking, no, we don't want you to do that because it's too dangerous or whatever. But no, I don't get any of that. Or you're right. They don't hire women. Nothing. No, none of that. He doesn't. He's giving. My dad was very matter of fact and very pragmatic, etc. So he, just there you go. So I was like, so he's thrown down a challenge here. Go with the state police. So I'm like, I think they're all 6 foot tall and men, and I'm pretty sure they're all old, and they
I
have.
can tell you when I was a teenager, they all felt like they're about 7 feet tall.
It is, you know, and I'm thinking,
We
we're
used
gonna
to
have
joke when
we're
when
get
I
a
was at
military haircut too, right?
when I was at the University of Maryland, because I also grew up I went to high school in Virginia. But we used to joke to the people who came over to the University of Maryland, we're like, "You can get away with speeding in Maryland, but don't cross the border."
Yeah,
The state troopers will get you, and they're just scary with those hats and the
it's very true.
it's
But
very they really have the whole intimidating, scary thing going on.
but there were just people who were genuinely nice to you.
Nice
They just were
people.
genuinely good to you, and you were like, This is nice."
How long did you stay on the roads? How
Uh, I was in uniform between the academy and on the road a total of 3.5 years.
Okay,
And
okay.
in Norfolk, I was in Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, and Portsmouth at that time. It was called Division 5, Area 32. Uh, so a lot of work, a lot of things every day. You
Yeah.
stayed busy all the time, which I liked. I'm a very I have to stay busy, so it worked out for me really well.
And was this, like, in what, the early '80s, I'm guessing?
80s, 86 to
'86?
89 is when I was in uniform.
Oh, and that explains we were talking before we got on about the Colonial Parkway murders,
Right.
and so that explains
Yeah.
that timing. What was it like there during that period? I've had Bill Thomas on several times, and I just adore the guy. He's had me on his podcast. Or have I been on his I don't think I've been on his podcast, but I've had him on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Mind Over Murder.
yep,
Bill Thomas. Yeah. Yeah. I remember when
and it
uh,
was his sister,
yes,
Kathy, who
It was
was one of the
Kathy
early
Thomas and Rebecca
victims.
Dowski.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember when that was on the news because it was on the news a lot, and WCYB was one of the main TV channels that was reporting it. Wavy 10 and a couple others, and it was a constant. It was in the newspapers, and it was worse than what they were putting in the papers. And how I know that is the agents and all that were kind of assisting and had were learning about it. Uh, they were hearing things, and they couldn't tell you much, but from what you could learn, it was far worse than what was written in the papers. And it was just you remember seeing their pictures over and over and over,
Yeah,
and you know, Bill's sister, of course,
Kathy.
had the Navy background. She was a Navy
Right.
officer, and so that was kind of, I mean, I guess sort of like it related to me in a way because she was in her uniform and her picture, and she's really close in age to me,
Yep. And
and she's
another
got that
woman
career,
who,
yeah, and
yeah.
she's really doing her thing, her job, what she wanted to do. She's chasing that dream, and at the same time, Rebecca Dowski was a student at William and Mary, and I had friends that were students or had been students at William and Mary. When I had gone to college at Old Dominion, we were all in the same club, so we saw each other all the time, like over weekends and stuff. And so that was that other tie to it, and it just kind of freaked you out because it was like, wow, this is a really tragic killing. And then when you have another killing the next year, and it's another couple, um, it was Robin and David, and they were killed out at Ragged Island, and then that's just brutal and horrific as well. Um, and it's just there's just creepy stuff about it, and you're I'm starting to hear more, and then the next year's coming up, and that's when they were talking to me and another female trooper, Bobby, Bobby Rose, and they wanted us to work these 3-day weekends, nights, 3 nights with undercover troopers or undercover agents, and
Mm.
we would just do a temporary thing. We would instead of wearing a uniform, dress up and go out on a date.
Try to be
um,
the best victim you
yeah,
possibly
try to
can,
be the best
essentially.
victim you can. Be
Mhm.
serial killer bait. Go out
Mhm.
and so I was with Taylor Blanton, and he had just become a special agent. He'd been a trooper, and now he was a special agent. And Taylor Blanton and I were going to sit in a 4-door sedan, unmarked car, uh, undercover, and we were going to make out for an entire weekend. Yeah. So
Because
basically,
remember, it wasn't the early theory that whoever this is was mad at couples and it was lovers' lanes, and we still don't know. I mean, it may have still been,
all of that stuff
but
seemed
yep.
to be the thing that this person was looking at couples, wanted to go after couples that were parking. That was the belief. Um, a lot of that, I don't know if that was so much the law enforcement so much, or if that's just how the newspapers started putting it out there. Because I remember it was being called the Lovers Lane murders at one
Mm,
point, but also referred to as the Colonial Parkway murders because of the initial, where they found Kathy and Rebecca and their vehicle. They're off the Colonial Parkway. Oh, but the proximity to Colonial Parkway with all the others, it just it was a thing, and so you could hear both callings of it. Each time this would happen, and of course you get another killing. Of course, this the third couple in that they've never found them. They've never found
right.
a
They found
trace of
their
them.
car, right?
They
That
found their
was
car, they found their
uh,
clothing, they found their wallet, they found his stuff, her pocketbook, their things, all their things. Um, it's a cold, wet, kind of a nor'easter kind of a night. It wasn't good weather at all. It's not the kind of weather that these young couple that you would think that they would have gone parking. That just wouldn't, that would have been like unappealing. Um, just to go to that location in that kind of weather. But to be completely naked and disappear makes no sense. And to
right.
have your stuff where it was in the vehicle and to leave the door, I believe that door was ajar. And,
Yeah,
and I
that
mean like
was
open.
Robert,
When I say ajar, I meant like open. But
David
to leave,
Knobling and Robert Edwards. Is that the one?
Robin Edwards, that was Ragged Island. That one
Okay,
was
that.
too. Same thing. Vehicle was abandoned. All the stuff was in it, and the
Oh,
door was
excuse me.
open.
Cassandra Haley Keith Call is the
Yes, that's it.
one. Yeah.
Cassandra Keith. Yes, and they just vanished. Uh, Um, that they would not have gone out in that water. No way. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it wasn't warm. It made they just vanished, and I hate that one probably more than anything because the family's got no closure. Or no, and it's not closure. That's a terrible word. they got no answers.
Yeah, and they don't have them home.
They never got an answer. They never got any imaginative justice whatsoever. They got nothing. And that's horrific. Uh, and then the last couple was on Interstate 64 out there near the West Point, like that area. Out in that area, there was what do you call it? A state pull off, where rest area.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yeah.
yeah, and they disappeared, and then the vehicle shows up, I think, on the opposite side of the interstate from the direction they were traveling on, in the rest area on the other side, like which made no sense, and it also things were in it. I want to say door was open or something, keys, everything's there, but they're just not there. They're just not there. And it's several weeks, months, 6 weeks maybe. I don't know. The bodies are found by somebody out in the woods hunting, I think, or whatever. They're kind of partially skeletized or, um, you know, just slightly buried,
Yeah.
but not much. Not like a real grave or anything, just covered up, sort of. But so that was always eerie, just incredibly eerie. And then now that they've come up with Alan Wilmer Sr. As being the person and the whole that DNA and just everything, tying that all back together, and then tracking down a couple more homicides of females, rape homicides, to him. And there's no telling how many more will go back to him. And also, there are people who disappeared in that time period when he would have been in that region, and there's no telling what happened to them or where he put them.
Yeah. Yeah. Such tough cases. What was it that caused you to make the transition from the roads to doing investigative work?
Um, when I went through the State Police Academy, well, like I said, first I wanted to be a trooper or wanted to be in law enforcement, became a trooper. And then when I got in the academy, I saw criminal investigations and it just hit. I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. I want to do criminal investigations. I want to do crime scenes. I want to catch bad guys. And it probably sounds so naive or so silly for that. But in 1986, at 23 years old, that's what I wanted to do. And part of that had to do with Dr. Marcello Fierro. And Dr. Marcello Fierro was a medical examiner out of Richmond. She eventually became the chief medical examiner for the state of Virginia. And she had a lady by the name of Patricia Cornwell working in her offices down in Richmond. And Miss Cornwell was to start writing some books about a Dr. K. Scarpetta. And I'm going to tell you, Dr. K. Scarpetta and Dr. Marcello Fierro, very similar. She was
How so?
fascinating. Oh my goodness. Dr. Marcello Fierro, fascinating. I had never had anybody teach me in a case study format. She taught in a case study format, and I was mesmerized. She came in to teach us about, well, we were going to go and do autopsies the next day. But she came in and she taught us, and she brought in the predecessor of PowerPoint. She brought in slides, and I
I thought
didn't get
that
grossed out. I didn't get grossed out at all. I was so enthralled and just
interesting.
learning. And every
Interesting.
word, you just hang on every word. It was like people watch true crime now, except she's right there in front of us in our classroom and she's teaching us. And it's fascinating. It's informative and you're learning. You're taking it in like a sponge. It was wonderful to learn that way. And then the next day, instead of, I thought I was going to be hesitant and not be too into this, going to an autopsy. And instead, I was like right at the front of the table asking questions. Um, I didn't poke the body, but I was definitely asking a lot of questions and wanting to know more. I just kept wanting to know more.
It's that same
And
curiosity that kept you at the door as a 6-year-old listening to the adult conversations.
very much, very
Wow.
much. And it was And I didn't forget this person that was on that autopsy table. And I did feel bad for the person because they had committed suicide, and
Mm. Yeah.
I thought this is this is horrific, but at the same time, we're learning from this person, and I wish they had called somebody or somebody had been there for them. Um, but at the same time, everything she was teaching us, I took it in, and I just knew it just clicked with me. Trust me, high school and college did not click with me like that. I was just getting by and having a good time and enjoying my friends. Uh, but all of a sudden, I was locked in, and I, I wanted to do well.
Enthralled, it sounds like.
My grades were really, really good through the State Police Academy. In fact, most of us, our scoring, we were like hundredths of a point difference between who was and who had the most and who had the least. Um, but yeah, we I like that a lot, and so when I was a trooper, every time I got a chance to be around the agents, or they would help get me to get to do some undercover or anything that came up, I wanted to do that because my goal was to become a special agent with the state police. That's all I could see, and everybody was like, "Learn to be a trooper first," and I was like, "I got that. How do I get to be an agent?" And then there were people who would actually tell me, and I'd be like, "That is not going to be easy, but I can do it." And I I wanted that so bad, and so someone who meant a lot to me encouraged me and said, "Hey, you might not get there with the state police, and it's not so much that you're female. It is just that it takes about 10 years to get there." And back then, it did. I talked to guys, and it did take them anywhere from 7 years at the earliest to 12 or 15 years before they actually could get promoted to be a special agent. There's only so many positions. There's taking a test, there's doing a panel interview. You got to have a great evaluation, which I had a really lousy evaluation year after year, a really bad one. Um, uh, there's all these things. And then there's just the experience. There's all the stuff that you got to have. And
Things you've
so
done.
you got to take a test, all this. And I was like, well, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. And he said, why don't you try applying for the feds? And I was like, oh, they are never gonna hire me. I'm not smart enough for that. He goes, "Yes, you are." I was like, I don't know about that. I don't think I could be a Fed. I don't think they would ever think about me." And he goes, "You need to think about that for sure. You need to start applying. You need to do it." So off I went to the little federal agencies. You had to get this long form, and there's a SF-371, huge form. When you fold it out, both sides had to be typed. Good old typewriter to fill it all out, and everybody wanted an original, um, and so you had to do an original form, and then you could take it in and get it copied. Uh, so I started filling it out, started applying to the feds, and at first they seemed interested, and then you just started hearing, "Well, we don't have a budget this year. We're not hiring many people this year. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. We'd like to stay in touch with you." Blah blah blah. And it was like, "Yeah, I don't think this is going to happen." And then the state police said, "How would you like to work as a full-time undercover?" Uh, it's not a it's not a promotion. It's just a increase in pay by 2 steps, but definitely not a promotion. Uh, and it'd be 1 year, and you'd be undercover. Well, everyone had told me if you work undercover, that'll help you get your foot in the door to be an agent with the state.
Ah,
And my love life had just pretty much landed on the rocks and shattered. So when I was offered that, I was like, "Yeah, I'll take it. Yes, whatever."
like good time.
Like, yeah, I get a new name, right? Yes. I get a new date of birth. Yep. New social security number. Yep. You guys are giving me an undercover car, right? Yeah, I can do this. Yeah, I get to
You're
be
like,
somebody.
by the way,
I don't get.
I was trying to get away from my old life anyway. This is
Yeah,
like the government sponsored version of it.
it was. It literally was. It was like we have the escape route for you. you get to not be that broken-hearted, miserable person.
Mm.
You're going to be somebody all brand new that's going to
You
go
should
out
make
and
this a
party.
divorce option for people, right?
You get to go hang out in crack houses now. You're going to feel a lot better.
It's going to be very different. I don't
Yeah,
know better, but
yeah. People are going to point guns at you, and you're just going to be okay.
what is undercover work really like? What was it like?
Oh,
I mean,
back
how
then
do you train for it, prepare for it? Like what how does this work?
I didn't.
They don't send you to Hollywood first?
No, they didn't send me to anything. They just said, "Here you go. Here's the keys to the car. Bye." Uh,
Do you?
yeah, we don't know where. And my uniform folks were just like, "I don't know where you're going. They're not telling us that. They don't tell us any of that. Good luck to you.
Mm.
If you want to come back, let us know." And that was it. And nobody said bye or hey, you want to go out and get a cold beer? No, nothing like that. I show up and I went to a meeting and then another meeting. And at the end of the meeting, uh, one of the men that were talking, uh, they said, "Well, as long as the girls play it safe, they should be okay."
Well, that's
I was like,
clear.
that sounds like a good idea. Did we just discuss us hanging out with 3 different gangs? Yeah, that I don't know much about crack. I've never really seen cocaine or well, I saw a little bit one time on a
Because this
traffic
would have
stop.
been late '80s, early '90s, early '90s, the
1989.
height of the crack epidemic.
The we
The
were right.
high.
Now, let's see. When Richmond was trying to become the number 1 homicide location in the country over cocaine and crack.
That must have been a really tough time because, it felt like it was an endless cycle.
It
Uh,
was.
yeah. And that there
Yeah,
was like, you weren't gonna social service your way out of it, you weren't gonna law
yeah,
enforcement yourself. None of these things alone were gonna tackle it.
yeah. But you also gotta figure that they still had some outdated or outmode things. Of course, they didn't know it at the time. They thought they were cutting edge, I guess. Uh, but it was this, "We just need you to make 3 felony buys from a person, then don't buy from them anymore." And I was like, we live in the same apartment complex, right?"
Yeah.
I see them all the time. I don't see you very often. I see you Monday mornings. Yeah. I can't just cut them off and, you know, uh, this is dangerous. Uh, but
It's
it
like
was a lot of
painting on your
things.
forehead, "I am an undercover cop."
Yeah.
Or even worse, actually, because I think the danger is less that an undercover cop gets identified as an undercover cop, gets mistaken for an informant.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was my biggest thing I had to worry about. And probably the thing that came up, I had been under for about 6 months and, I had, the head of one of the gangs, we called him Papa Ford. Anyway, he had started making comments about myself and the informant I was running with at the time that he thought we were snitching and, that, if we were, something was gonna have to be done about it. Well, that's just never good, especially with his family,
Yeah.
because they always carried guns, and, one of the brothers was actually, at that time, he was wanted by New York for a homicide of a security guard up there, and there was just a lot of mess with that particular family. But then I had 2 other gangs that I was running with, and, one of them, he was wanted he was being looked at for a homicide in Richmond, and, which is interesting enough, about the same time that that happened, he relocated to where we were, and we were in, Stanton
Ah,
in
ah.
Augusta County,
Oh,
and he
yeah, so
suddenly
west,
yeah.
far west and then north of Richmond.
Yeah, but along the interstate again, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's still on the
81,
interstate.
64, right?
Yeah.
And, so he suddenly was there, not too far from Richmond, but far enough, right? And, so, I knew they carried guns too, plus they were really big into, having, people straw buy, Tech 9 9 millimeters, and then they were trafficking them back into New Jersey, and for that, they were, getting crack and bringing it back down into Virginia to deal. So
Ah,
so
right.
I was getting an awful lot of intel in addition to, spending a lot of time with the drug dealers, and buying off the drug dealers and seeing the guns they carried and just knowing in advance what was going to go on. And then they were talking about me buying guns for them, and that was things were just starting to escalate up higher and higher. And my going into the crack business for them. In fact, they wanted me or were talking to me about actually being on the JMU campus in
In
Harrisonburg.
Harrisonburg, James Madison
Yeah,
University. Yeah.
yeah, and that was Thomas Tony's gang. He was very businesslike, always businesslike, and basically how to make the next dollar, you know. And he was showing me how I can make a couple of $1,000s more a week, which I got to tell you, in 1989, dropping a couple of thousand a week was
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other gang dealing with them, and there's different other things that they had me running and doing because I ended up buying drugs from the Mennonites up in Dayton, Virginia.
Really?
Uh,
That's
yeah,
interesting. Wow.
yeah, it was a little different.
Yeah. That's definitely a
Really,
different one.
yeah, I thought that was definitely sending me on the road to hell right then. Turns out they were selling drugs.
It's really
But
sort of like the crazy things that you must
uh,
find as an undercover just going along with, you're like, this can't be real. It is real.
everything that they had me doing, and like I said, I spent 6 months, and then there was a really bad shooting incident that took place where we were, and things kind of had to come to an end pretty quickly because just a lot of bad things took place all at once, and so then I reappeared or reemerged in Portsmouth, Virginia, which was much worse than where
Yeah.
I had been. Uh, so because the crack houses in Portsmouth, you know, they they were rank.
I
Uh,
can only imagine the early
yeah, and I mean, the
1980s
very first
Portsmouth.
one, yeah, I go there and my cover team, they're like 6 blocks away because there's four white guys in a van, and they don't fit in. Just like, you can't
Right.
come. You,
Portsmouth, a very, very black neighborhood during that
yeah,
time. I think it still is, but yeah.
very much in that particular time, it's particularly in the projects, in the very roughest neighborhoods, the Ida Barbara area,
Yeah.
and the Jeffrey Wilson. You couldn't be in those neighborhoods. They couldn't. I could. They couldn't.
It's
And
like one of those scenes where, and I used to laugh at this all the time because there are some really good undercover cops. They're fun. I remember in New York, when I was in New York, where they could blend in so well, and then certain ones couldn't. And you could see they would pick them out, and they would be like, "Hey, officer, what's up?"
yeah,
And
that's
you're
it.
like,
Yeah,
"Oh."
yeah.
They're
You
like,
just
"You should not be here." Right?
yeah.
That was the tip off.
And that was it. You just learn it very quickly, So I was very lucky. I didn't have those issues, and I wasn't being called out or being called a cop. And when I spent the 6 months, I had my top side was a guy named Charlie, and I always knew Charlie had my back. It was pretty much just me and Charlie, and then we got Scott Klein. He was a detective from Waynesboro, and so then I had Charlie and Scott looking after me. So I always felt pretty good. And
So the way it
yeah,
sort of operated, you would go out on an assignment, but plainclothes cops would generally, most of the time, be somewhere nearby, ready as sort of like a
I
backup.
I liked it if they could be within 2 blocks was always
Okay.
nice, and,
Okay.
and if they 2 to 6 blocks was always good. A mile out was really not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, and then, like I said, in Portsmouth, I I didn't need 4 white guys in a van. That's the most I ever had in a van there, but I didn't need 4 white guys in a van to be anywhere near me, so that they stayed about 6 blocks out. I'm not even
Mm.
sure if they knew where I was. I mean, they knew I'd be, like, in Jeffrey Wilson or in Ida Barber in that particular housing project. They just didn't know which rundown crack house I was in, I don't think. It didn't seem like they did, but they were able to get 2 black officers from the Portsmouth Police Department to work with us, and those guys were great, and they knew the neighborhoods, and so they would wear a walkie-talkie mic radio system that would come up to their ear, and they'd just put on their coats because it was wintertime, and they would, patrol or walk the neighborhood, and they
Hang
would
out and
usually
be
stay.
cold, as I like to
Yeah.
say.
And they would literally stay out in the cold and be out there for about and be within about a block of me. But they knew exactly where I was, and we had an agreement that if things went bad, get low, get small. Go to the floor, get small,
Mm,
and just stay there. And
and
they
let
and
them
they
come
just
in.
they promised me they'd be there, and I believed them. And
What a weird way to live,
yeah,
by the way.
yeah, it was.
Did
And
you
like
ever have moments where you were like, "What am I doing?" You know what I mean? Like, this is just a weird way to live? Or did you and it sounds like you enjoyed it,
I was doing it, and I was good at it, and I had goals. I think I had goals,
right?
and, because like I said, if I could do that and I could be good at it, maybe I could become an agent faster with the state. Maybe somehow or another, by luck and a couple 3 years, I could, I mean, 2 or 3 more years beyond what I already had, I could do that. Or maybe one of those federal agencies would actually, remember my name or give me a call or something, write me a letter. And 'cause that's about the only way you could get anything back then. And I only got my mail, every few weeks. I didn't really see my personal mail very often. And so it was kind of different, and I was hoping. And sure enough, in the middle of all this, when I was being recruited to buy guns and to trade them for crack and to go into business and stuff, we reached out to ATF, and a nice agent by the name of Tom Waring came up from Roanoke, and we met in the middle of the night and had pizza and sat around and talked about all the bad guys and all the problems and all the stuff we were doing and all the guns and all the drugs and the money and all the localities that were involved. And they then explained to me, we don't walk guns. That's not going to happen. So the logistics of trying to follow you from Virginia to Plainville, New Jersey, into a major supplier's house or whatever,
It'd be so difficult,
and
yeah.
and it back, um, we couldn't guarantee your safety at all on that, and we don't. And it would be very difficult and involve a lot of logistics um, on the overall. Plus, we'd have to let go of the guns at that point, and that's not going to happen. And then the other part of that is, you coming back with the drugs. And so it's like, yeah, I guess it's not going to happen. But it sounded good. And they're like, nope, nope, that's TV, and we can't do it that way. But you know, what you've been doing, what you've got, what we have here, it's going to make for great state cases as well as great federal cases. And you know, you're doing a great job. I mean, everybody was being nice to me and telling me that. I was like, thank you. So we're outside, and I thought, well, the ATF guys are known for giving away ammo to cops, and they usually keep some in their car. I'm going to ask him if he's got any. So I said,
I
look,
figure they were blowing kisses at you
I
before,
said,
so
I carry this little Colt Mustang Light 380, and I was just wondering if you had a box of 380 on you. And he said, you know what? I think I do. So he pops open the trunk and gets it out for me and gives it to me, and I thought, well, shoot your shot. You got one last chance here. I said, I applied for ATF. And he said, you did? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, how far did you get? And I told him, and he said, are you still interested? And I was like, yeah, yeah, I am. And he said, do you have a place where somebody can contact you? Of course, at this point,
yeah, is there a way to find you?
Does anybody know how to get in touch with you? And I said, yeah, I'm going to be on my friend's couch at this location for 2 days because I need to get my taxes done. I need to file them. And I'm, everything that's been going on. I'll just be there getting
So
my
during
taxes
this
done.
period, you had no home?
I had a, a housing project
House.
apartment.
Wow.
I had an
Wow.
apartment in me and another female undercover.
Wow.
She worked one city and I worked at another area, but we started out together and they split us out, and I worked with one set of informants and she worked with another set of informants, and
Wow.
then we just worked a lot of different people. So that's why we took down so many people at that time, because we were just buying dope all day, every day, just constantly, and we're buying it all over the central Shenandoah Valley. And because of that, it's at that time it was the biggest drug bust in the state of Virginia.
Yeah, what was the story behind that?
As to how that was?
Yeah,
Yeah,
as to
just
how that went down, because I did read about it being one of the largest, and
it
it's
was
still
at the
one of the
time.
largest, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, I guess it was just because her and I were buying so much dope from so many people all the time, and we literally were buying from everybody. Like I said, if I'm buying from Mennonites and gangbangers,
True.
um, New Jersey gangbangers, yeah, you kind of I'm mixing it up pretty well there, and then bought, you know,
Very diverse portfolio.
yeah, it just was very different, and nobody was looking at us at that time at all, especially being females. It was very limited. I just remember one guy saying something. I bet these girls are Maryland troopers. And I got tickled because we're in the middle of Virginia when he said that. I
Like,
was just
"Hey,
like,
man, you know what state we're in?"
does that,
Right?
and what planet does that make sense in? But at the same time, you're like, yeah, okay,
You're like,
yeah,
"You got half
whatever.
of that really right."
Yeah. And, you're not even close, but good luck to you there, buddy, because I don't think you're smart. but, but
Smart
we
enough
did,
to get half of it right.
yeah, only, yeah. And, so it was an interesting thing. And of course, Uh, she did a great job, and then she was actually a Stanton police officer. She was brand new out of the academy, and they had let her work in dispatch for a few weeks until this assignment got started August 15th. And like I said, it went through until February 15th, and like I said, came to an abrupt stop. And then, like I said, I shifted, and by the she probably by about the 24th or so of February, I was buying dope in Portsmouth. And, then I at least when I was there, I moved back to a friend of mine's, place and started sleeping on a couch. That was my life. It's like, I have really gotta do better. I don't think my parents wanted me to live in a crack house. I don't think they wanted me to live in a housing project. I'm darn sure that they're thinking I'm still not living on somebody's couch. I gotta do better. I gotta improve. And, that's when ATF is like, I get a phone call, and the next thing you know, I'm an ATF agent. It's just a matter of like 4 months. Poof.
Wow.
And come June, well, uh, June 18th, I was sworn in. That was 1990, June 18th. I was sworn in with ATF as a special agent.
Oh, that's interesting. So
Yeah.
what kind of the ATF is a really interesting agency. I think now Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, but even back in the good old ATF days, you guys dealt with all of it.
A
Um,
moonshiner.
yeah, right. Everything.
Yeah.
Proud descendant
It
of moonshiners over here.
it has been an agency that they have thrown a lot at,
It's the
Bureau of
everything.
Prohibition, and Bureau of Prohibition, all of these other names, all these different things. There was even a couple of years where the federal, um, lawmakers, the Congress, assigned them to gambling, and so they had about 2 or 3 years of enforcing the gambling laws on the federal
Wow.
level. Um, and it was just like, how many more things can you tag onto a name? Uh, the explosive laws came to ATF, and they got that, you know, uh, technically, I guess, back in, about 1968, but then more so with, 1972 with some laws that were enacted. And then in 1982, the Arson Act, Federal Arson Act, became ATFs. And
Right.
so really arson, explosives or bombings, and then of course firearms are the main primary things that they do. The stuff with alcohol and the moonshining kind of went
It's
away,
died
faded
down a
away.
little bit.
Uh, Legalization helps with that, a lot of
Right. Yeah, that's right.
legalization, you
Yes,
know,
that's very true.
and then, the tobacco thing has always been like a really odd, because when I
State
got over
thing,
there,
right? Because a lot
it
of that's
is
the
and it isn't, it really
taxes.
depends,
Yeah.
and you had to have, like, a number of cigarettes and how many was smuggled and this and that and the other, and it was kinda weird because tobacco's taxes and stuff are paid at the manufacturing site, so it's really not, much to it. But then later on, it became this thing, in the 2000s where groups like Hezbollah and then other basically organized crime from around the world
Don't
found
tell
out
me
that there's
Hezbollah was buying cigarettes in Mississippi and selling them in New York City to fund
Yep,
terrorism.
yep,
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
2003 is when they got busted out there in Charlotte, North Carolina,
It
and
makes
then
sense.
yeah, it was, and it's a big thing because the amount of money that they would charge to sell cigarettes in places like New York City or like California, like Michigan, versus what cigarettes cost down in Mississippi or down in North Carolina, those places. And so there was this huge amount of
Oh,
money,
yeah, I
but there was
remember
no downside as far as people going to prison for a long time.
not that
Uh,
I would ever smuggle
yeah,
cigarettes, but when I
no,
was in Virginia or I was living in New York and I was down here in Virginia, and it's funny, I really didn't, but what I would do is I would buy my cigarettes when I came to visit my parents here, grab a couple
hmm
cartons. But you could buy a loose cigarette in New York for $1 a cigarette, and it only
hmm
cost me $2 for a pack in
yep,
Virginia. So, yeah, you could make real money.
yeah. So it's actually several $billion that are lost in the taxes for the states. Each state loses a billion or more dollars a year
Wow.
uh, to the diversion of the cigarettes or the and the tobacco market and all. So it's very odd, and it happens a lot too for like British American tobacco, which is overseas. And you start seeing how this works and the trafficking of all of it. The 7/7 bombing in London in
Yeah,
2005. Yeah,
2005. Yeah.
there is actually documentation on that, and I think it's been written about in a couple of books in which it came through Miami, and part of that funding was through the diversion of tobacco, and
Yeah,
that's
it's the
that's
stuff
what the
that
funding was.
you never really think
Yeah,
about that idea of any regulated or taxed market is an opportunity for people to divert things
right.
to and some of that diversion may be just lining some guy's pocket, but some of it is to get you know
Yeah,
eh, to tap into sources for cash for things banks don't give loans for, like terrorism.
yeah,
uh,
right. Well, the last few things that I did that involved large amounts of money actually were tobacco cases that were being worked that were international, and in one, they gave me $400,000 to deliver to the bad guys. And I get there, and the bad guys are like very polite businessmen. They're not, it's just not. It doesn't have the crack house feel. Trust me on that one.
right.
And they've got these. They had money counters going in the room, uh, counting all the money that was coming through, and plus the 400,000 I brought that was being delivered to them. And in this process, they got to walk out of this room with like $1.5 million,
Wow.
and it's all in this huge thing that's ongoing. So that happens, and they leave, and then then everybody's following them, surveilling them, keeping up with it. But later on, we did a search warrant down in Darlington, South Carolina, and there's some folks down there that were running a tobacco warehouse, but they were skimming a lot of money out of it. So, when we're doing this search warrant, there's 67,000 in the secretary's petty cash drawer, which is a lot for that. But there's this little cheap kind of a file cabinet sort of thing behind me where you normally keep like pens and paper and stuff. And there's a bunch of boxes in there with people's first names on them. And when you open up the boxes, there's just a massive amount of cash in each one. So by the end of the day, we had $2.1 million out of this search warrant out of this location,
Wow.
and that's not including all of the other stuff that got seized and taken, as far as land and cars and houses and jet skis and they had all the toys, like all the toys. Yeah,
That's wild.
it was an amazing amount of money. And then we looked at like who the top players were in some of it. The guy who was the number one money launderer in the Western Hemisphere, and he was a banker, and then he became president of a country um, much further south than here. Um, he
I have a
was helping to
small
launder back
guess.
in like 2000 and like in 2007, he was laundering like $8 billion a year for the cartels,
Wow.
and um, he was fascinated by being able to invest into tobacco and to use that as a way to launder money in the United States. And, the DEA was looking at it. Everybody was looking at the guy, the FBI, the DEA, and here's ATF, like right there with him, like hanging out with him. So much so that they were at the Mirage in Vegas with him. So it was like,
Wow.
and of course you're like, you guys want to meet him, you got to be there because we're, going to be gambling there, and he's coming into town because he wants to do business. So there was a lots of things going on in the tobacco stuff it was just, it would blow your mind at these massive cases and how many financial forensic fraud people that had to work, to keep up with the money and the doing, and how many attorneys had to be involved to keep up with what was going on and all the different criminal charges. And then you're trying to connect with people in different countries because of the ties that are all international. And of course, everybody's searching out where the cash money's going to, who's it funding, what's it funding.
Yeah, you've got all those analysts who are trying to keep track of that stuff.
Constantly, everything. And you're watching it.
I think that's a great spot to stop for today. And we can come back next week and continue the conversation, dive a little bit more into these ATF investigations that are so fascinating, Jennifer. And, also talk about 9/11, the aftermath at the Pentagon, the Centennial Park bombings, and much more. In the meantime, everyone, if you'd like to join us for more discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with other listeners, you can also join us on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/the Silver Linings Handbook. For those of you who are interested in true crime, you can come join us on Substack for the True Crime Times. You can find the link in the show notes for it, or just search for it on Substack. I've also started my own Substack called The Center Holds, which is really about sort of finding a center for all of us in this fractured society. I hope you all enjoy yourselves and have a great week. I'm Jason Blair, and this is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. We'll see you guys all again soon.